Hello, my name is Angela Volitari, and today I'm going to be discussing Asian versus United States corporate culture and management styles. Initially, it's imperative to recognize the alliance between the United States and Asian countries and the interdependence that one another have in the international business market. Therefore, we do need to analyze various aspects of both cultures and marry both so that when making business decisions and partnerships and strategic alliances, we are mitigating risk and eliminating barriers that exist between both cultures. So the primary example that I would like to bring forth to understand the major differences between both the cultures is the concept of black versus white and what they represent in each culture. Particularly in advertising situations, we will see that across the border, you see there are different styles in targeting different cultures for various reasons. In Asia, the color white necessarily does not have such of a positive, entailment as it does in the United States. It actually represents something more negative. So they use it when they're mourning, at funerals, etc. Where in, the American culture, white is a color that is celebratory. We use it to represent purity. We have our brides wear it at weddings. So in a business environment, the way that this could be understood and more applicable is, maybe when we, the United States, make business decisions and we're in meetings, we gear away towards wearing white colors, or maybe, when we're advertising, we choose local advertisement approaches instead of globalizing. This way, we're more sensitive to things like color-sensitive situations. Another key point is, taking all of this into account and realizing, the vast differences between both cultures is how do we create fluidity between both cultures to make the business environment more easy and more adaptable. So identifying the differences in cultures is one of the main things that can help us eliminate these barriers. So primarily, collectivism versus individualism is something that is very specific to each culture, especially Asia versus the United States. So in Asia, they take a more collectivism approach. So their management styles are geared more towards, the greater good, where in the United States, we're more individualistic. So we pride ourselves on, individual accomplishments, what you could do to make it to the top for yourself, and you're more concerned with your goals and your accomplishments than your colleagues and coworkers. Another is styles of communication. Americans we do not fear conflict, and we do not fear making conflict public, as opposed to in Asian culture, even we see politically, they avoid conflict at all costs, and everything is done behind closed doors and more privately. The media is not as invasive as it is in the United States, which attests further to the cultural differences. Another difference in cultures is the self-promotion versus humility. This kind of ties back to the collectivism versus individualism. In America, we're all me, how can I improve myself? How can I accomplish my goals? As opposed to in Asia, they like to be humble. They like to, say, I accomplished this because of this person, rather than taking full accountability and responsibility. And then another main one that I want to discuss is relationship versus economics. So in the Asian business culture, to them, it's imperative that they build some sort of a trust before making a business alliance. While meanwhile in America, we're more financially driven and we're more concerned with time efficiency. So we're not necessarily looking to build that personal relationship the way, they are in Asian cultures. So leadership styles that differ, a lot of it I saw in the hierarchical structure. In America, we're concerned with titles and who reports to who and who has jurisdiction over what decisions, where in Asia it's more cohesive. So it's more of an interdependent environment where I don't make a decision unless it's approved by everyone around me, regardless to title position. So they could be superior, inferior, at a lateral level. I still take into consideration, how it would affect them. I want their input, and it's more about employee empowerment. Another leadership difference is, the main one that I found that was most profound in a lot of my studies was the financial term versus building valuable relationships, which I mentioned, priorly. America is more concerned with the payoff that come as a result from business alliances, where Asia is more concerned with, is this going to build a long-term relationship? Can I trust this person moving forward? What benefits does it have, other than financial? So, that really shows the vast, vast differences in cultures ultimately. So another study that I found very interesting is there was an American businessman, and he conducted sort of almost like an observational kind of case study where he almost followed the route of building a business relationships cross-culturally. And the ultimate conclusion that he came to was that it's almost like a courtship process. So essentially, there's an ethical component where, you're pursuing this individual. You want to make sure that your values are aligned. You want to make sure that you both have the same interests. You both like each other. Then it moves to the mutually beneficial stage, and then it moves to, whatever happens then, whether there's a payoff, whether there's a long-term relationship, whatever. And I just found it funny, the parallels that exist. Another thing that was very interesting is that this professional found that distance is enchantment. So essentially, just like a long-term relationship, long distance relationship where, out of sight, out of mind type of thing. If you don't know what they're doing, all you care is that you're gaining something from it, I guess some sort of love or feeling of affection, you're happy. It's the same thing with a business relationship. So if I'm working somewhere, I have a manufacturing plant overseas in Vietnam, say, I'm just happy that they're carrying out their proper function. I'm not necessarily concerned with how they're treating their employees, which brings up the ethical component of all of this. Do we make sure that Asian workers are treated at the same level and held to the same standard in terms of working standards and, compensation that we would make sure Americans were entitled to? Obviously not. So this is where, we get ourselves into trouble. A great example is Foxconn, the company that works for manufacturing parts for Apple. They essentially neglect to make sure that employees are treated properly, even though technically they are employed by an American company. So there have been horror stories about, employees committing suicide and employees being mistreated and getting pay where they could barely sustain any type of reasonable lifestyle. And we know this, American corporations and American leaders know this and fail to accommodate or fail to adapt to help, because all we care about is that we're getting what we need at the end of the day and that it's cost effective. So, that's an issue when working overseas and when partnering with countries that don't necessarily have the same laws, have the same standards, and don't necessarily protect their workers the way we protect our workers in the United States. So, personally, as a result of all my research and my findings, I found it interesting that, cultures could come together in order to create a mutually beneficial business relationship and, really overlook their differences. Not that any of this comes easy. That's another component of it. Specifically in this case, we are discussing, an Asian culture in the United States, but I think it's also important to take into account cultures that vary even more vastly and realize that they have even more of a struggle to deal with, because in my personal experience, I work at Leviton Manufacturing Company, and my sister works there as well. She works in the International Business Department, and we work very, very heavily with Dubai and with the Middle East. And at times, my sister will have to contact, our main person there, and they will refuse to speak to her when they realize that she's a female. So, in a business situation, us as American business people, how do we respect, Dubai's culture and Dubai's mentality without, infringing on the rights or infringing on the personal experience of the employees. So these are just interesting concepts, just some great reflection. It was a great opportunity to get to do research on this. Thank you so much and have a great day.